Welcome to Immigration Quicktake. This is Ellie Rutledge with the American Immigration Lawyers Association. Yesterday, the Senate Appropriations Committee held a hearing on the review of the President's emergency supplemental request for unaccompanied children and related matters. Here to discuss the outcome of the hearing is Chen, Director of Advocacy at AILA. Greg, thanks for joining me. What were the takeaways from the hearing?
Well, Ellie, not surprisingly, yesterday, the Republicans lined up primarily on the side of blaming the President and the administration for essentially creating this humanitarian crisis with weak enforcement policies and with amnesty. Senator Shelby of Alabama called the President's policies magnet policies that are attracting people to come here and cross our borders. By and large, the Democrats focused more on the humanitarian crisis, with some of them referring to it as a refugee problem now in Central America. Senator Harkin of Iowa spoke eloquently about the fact that we cannot treat these children and families like cattle. He said we cannot round them up and simply ship them back. And he called for careful, meaningful opportunity for these children to be able to access protections like asylum, to have legal representation, and the such. The two big points of contention now that need to be figured out, one is whether the supplemental funding will pass. And of course, we need additional funding for this crisis. Secondly, the big issue is whether or not the legal protections given to these children, particularly in the trafficking bill of 2008, are going to be watered down through this process.
Thanks, Greg. What are the next steps?
The U.S. government really needs to bring to bear the substantial resources and coordination needed to address this major humanitarian crisis, something that the United States has not faced in a long time on its borders. America can also do a lot better than what we saw yesterday in the Senate, the kind of bickering in a partisan fashion that doesn't address the fact that we have children who are in need. And Americans, once they understand the level of this kind of problem, will want to help. We're talking here about children who are fleeing from gang violence, who have experienced sexual assault, who have been persecuted and need protection. And at the very minimum, we're talking here about treating them humanely and fairly and giving them the kind of process that is already established in U.S. law.
What are AILA's recommendations on the supplemental?
So with respect to the supplemental, there are really two issues. One is the supplemental itself and the money. There's no question, for this level of humanitarian crisis, there needs to be an infusion of additional funds for the U.S. government to be able to deal with it across the board. Some criticism that AILA has about the current amount of funding requested by the President, the $3.7 billion. One is too much money is being asked for more enforcement. We've already seen excessive enforcement in the past decade. That's not necessary. The $1.5 billion more that the President is asking for is just not necessary. On the other hand, we're not seeing enough money to address the root causes of the problem. $300 million was requested for Department of State to help work with those country governments. That should be increased. Also, for Department of Justice, more money should be requested for judges, for legal representation and legal orientation for those children. The second major issue is the supplemental should be kept clean. And what I mean by that is no additional riders of authorizing legislation should be put on this. In an appropriations context, that's simply not appropriate to put authorizing legislation on there. And on a more policy concern level, we should not be undermining the legal protections that are already in existence in U.S. law for these children. The Secretary of Homeland Security, Jay Johnson, testified that he wants to get more authority from Congress to be able to apply the process that is currently used for Mexican kids from contiguous countries and apply that process to Central American kids. A few problems with that. One, the process for Mexican kids is already inadequate. It's too fast. CBP officers are interviewing children and screening them for things like asylum within 48 hours. CBP officers are just not trained to do that, and their facilities, the environment is just not suitable for that. That process should not be applied to unaccompanied children coming from Central America, and the TVPRA, the Trafficking Bill of 2008, should not be amended in any way, and AILA is opposed to any kinds of proposals to do that.
Thank you, Greg, for joining us. For the rest of you, please stay tuned for more updates from the American Immigration Lawyers Association.